Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Art of Slowing Down podcast. It's your host here, Annalena. As always, I'm very excited to be with you all. And today, again, I have a beautiful guest with me. Her name is Hope Pedraza, and I'm going to formally introduce her, and then we're going to take it away. So, she is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, a certified holistic nutritionist, a Reiki practitioner, and also a human design guide. So, we're going to have a lot of fun today. And she's also the founder of InBalance, a Pilates-based fitness franchise, as well as the host of the Hopeful and Wholesome podcast. And she helps female entrepreneurs find healing and balance in their bodies and businesses with functional nutrition, human design, and energy healing. So welcome, Hope. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you. I've listened to your podcast for so long, so it's so cool, like talking to you in person.
Yeah, I know. I know you reached out to me on Instagram and then I got your email and I was like, whoa, I'm glad she reached out. So, because I, as you know, love to talk about all things human design. Here and there, I have an episode where we don't dive into human design because I also sometimes have guests that are not into human design, but I obviously love to nerd out on human design, as you can tell. So, I want to ask you actually, what brought you to human design and what did it for you in your life?
Yeah. So I found it a few years ago. I was working with a spiritual coach, and she wasn't like a human design coach or anything, but she had a really small piece of human design in her program. It was more just like, look at your chart and kind of learn about, your type and stuff. And for me, that was enough to really just whet my appetite. And I'm like, I got to know more. Like, this is crazy. Looking at your chart, I'm sure everybody says the same thing. Like, I feel seen, I feel validated. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, all the thing I had felt all of those things. And so I just kind of took it upon myself to go down the rabbit hole, and I started diving in. I connected with a gal on Facebook somehow. I mean, it was all divine, intervention. And she was
Mm.
a human design coach. And so I did a lot of work with her and just diving into my chart. And so for me, it's been, I mean, really, it's changed everything for me. And that's why I brought it into my business, because it was unlearning and relearning, right? And it
Mm.
was accepting the pieces of me that I felt like I needed to apologize for or change about myself. It was owning myself maybe for the first time, like parts of myself, and feeling like I didn't need to change certain parts, like it could just be me. And so yeah, I think with the changes it's made within me and in my own personal development and my own spiritual journey, I knew once I started my functional diagnostic nutrition work that I wanted to bring a piece of that in with my client, because it was making such a difference in my life and how it was showing up, and my health and my well-being and all the things.
Mm. And so what is your human design type?
I am a 3-5 sacral mani-gen.
So we have a managing conversation here today. That usually is a lot of fun. Awesome. I love it. So tell us also a little bit about, so you bring in nutrition, and I find that very interesting because, I mean, human design has just a little bit really about nutrition, and it's more so in the variables as well, right? With the digestion and stuff like that. And I found that very interesting. So, but I would love to hear. So, if I were to come to you, our client comes to you, what do you look at a chart
Mhm.
that helps you combine that with a nutrition part?
Yeah, yeah. So I kind of take it's kind of a multifaceted approach, which I mean, just reading my bio, like you can tell I'm managing. I do like 28 things
Yeah,
and put it
yeah.
all into one. So it's like
Mm,
that's just what I love to do. But for me, really, it was being able to put together the physical pieces with the emotional, energetic pieces. And I am a
mm,
firm believer that there is an emotional root cause to everything that's showing up physically on the body.
mm,
And I wanted to be able to use human design as a tool to really uncover where and why those things were showing up. So when you come to me, as an FDNP, I run functional labs. So I run labs with my clients. And so we have the data, right? We have the
mm,
science. It's like, okay,
mhm,
this is what's going on. We see it in black and white. This is it. Then using human design, I also use a certified hypnotherapist and NLP. I use these other tools. And so we can put all those things together
mm,
to get to the root cause of the emotional, energetic piece. So when I'm looking at someone's design, we kind of go through the high level things, right? Just basic understanding of their type, strategy, authority, all things. But then for me, it's diving into, okay, let's talk about like patterns that are showing up in, relationships, behavior, thought patterns, that kind of thing. Then we can go in and look at like open centers, for example. Let's look at open centers and see where these
Mm,
things might be coming from. And then, since the chakra system is part of human design, I can kind of put together, okay, what's happening in this energy center? This corresponds with these particular organs or glands. And so we can kind of start putting puzzle pieces together. These are the things that might be stored, stuck here in these particular centers. This is where we want to focus on. So when I do my work with like NLP and hypnosis and stuff, we're working on like releasing stored emotions that could be stored in certain centers of the body. And then from there, it's just working on kind of like that deconditioning part, right? That rewiring part of them understanding, what their open centers are these particular gates they have defined or whatever it is, and being able to kind of rewire and rework why that thing got there in the first place.
mm. Well, yeah, it's really fascinating. And I love that you combine, especially what I like is that you also combine the scientific part, right, with
Mhm.
actually doing the labs and things. Because I mean, I know people can easily like, yeah, that's just the woo-woo and just the
Right.
spiritual. And
Yes.
I always love the combination of both, where we're not like discarding one as the right and one as the wrong, but
Right.
actually, okay, let's take the best of both worlds, bring it
Exactly.
together, and
Mm-hmm.
because it's like bringing the yin and the yang together,
Totally.
right? So
I love the science and the woo. Like that, the
yeah,
combination of that is just, yeah, it's awesome.
exactly. So, but I'm also very interested in, especially since you also, just like me, you mainly work with entrepreneurs, right? And you work also specifically with female
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
So you also specialize, or you mentioned a lot when you reached out to me about cycle syncing
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, how, especially women, when we work and in the business world, like when we lean into the, I guess we call it the masculine way. And, we tend to have a cycle. And I know for myself, there's some days where I don't want to do
Mm-hmm.
anything. And
Totally.
yeah, so anyways, I would love to hear from you. How do you approach this? What are some of the
Yeah.
tips you have for all the beautiful women out there?
Yeah, I love this. So this is a kind of another one of those tools like human design that I love putting together and helping. I mean, it's really for me, it's all about like getting to the root cause, like why it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just creating, I know like ease and flow are such fluffy words and we throw those around a lot in human design, but really, I mean, that's what I want for women. Like I want them to feel more at ease in their body and for things to feel more flowy and light and not like pushing and forcing, because yeah, there are times in the month where you really don't feel like doing anything. And so for me, it's using cycle syncing. It's giving women a basic understanding of their cycle. I think that's the first piece, because you would be amazed, maybe you wouldn't, but how many women really don't understand their cycle. And I say that with no judgment or shame or
Mm-hmm.
anything, but it's like we were not taught, at least I know generally speaking, most of us weren't taught. We were taught like we have a period, and then once you get a period, you're pregnant. It's like that's kind of the extent of it. Like, in eighth grade
Yeah.
biology, it's like you don't really learn a whole lot past that. And so I think just having a deeper understanding of your cycle, like how your hormones fluctuate throughout the month, and then being able to put that together with productivity and like output, and so that it's not this consistent, because yeah, I mean, we can get caught in that the masculine same, basically the masculine structure looks like same output day in day out, right? 24/7,
Mm,
365.
mm,
Because as many of your listeners probably know, men run on the same 24-hour hormonal cycle. Like their hormones are the same every single day. Ours change every
mm,
28 days, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but they're constantly fluctuating throughout the month. And so doing things the same way men are doing them just really doesn't make sense. It really
mm,
doesn't.
mm,
And when we understand when our, creativity is at its height, when we understand when our intuition is at its height, like we can really use this as our superpower. So I'll give you asked for tips. So for example, during the first day, in case anyone doesn't know, the first day of your cycle is your first day of bleeding. So that's day one. And
mm,
so when you are menstruating, when you're actually on your period, this is when the right and left sides, hemispheres of your brain are more in flow with each other. So we have our intuition is higher during this
mm,
period. And so this is when you can, our energy is low because our hormones are low, right? It's the lowest point of your hormonal cycle fluctuations. So our hormones are low, so our energy is low. So this is the perfect time to, kind of slow down, take a step back and rest, and to go inward. And that's what I encourage my clients to do. This is the time to go inward,
Mhm.
to do that inner work, the journaling, the meditation, all the things, to tuning in and wait for those intuitive downloads, those intuitive hits, because we are so much more in tune with our intuition during this part of our cycle.
Mhm.
Whereas when we're going into the second half of our follicular phase, which is like after you finish your period, it's after bleeding, moving on towards ovulation, our hormones start to increase. And so our creative brain kind of comes back online. I know for me, it's like a static. It's like you can't see through the static, and all of a sudden the static kind of clears. So it's like your creative brain comes back online, your creativity, your productivity, your social what's the word I'm trying to say, you're more social during this time.
Mhm.
So this
Mhm.
is a time when you're like getting things done, you're doing the networking events, you're doing the calls, you're being social with your friends, right? So this is the time when you're putting yourself out there, you're feeling more confident, you're feeling more energetic. And then as your hormones start to move down the other side of the slope there, moving on into the luteal phase is for me. And so I the way I teach it to my clients, I teach them like it's the seasons of the year. So we start with winter as a menstruation. We go to spring, what's that late follicular phase, and then summer is ovulation. This is like the peak of everything.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then you go to fall. So during the fall, and I say that because it makes the luteal phase makes more sense when you think of it as fall or autumn. So when you think about fall, the season, you think about, okay, the leaves are falling, right? We're like getting ready for winter, getting ready to like hibernate and slow down or whatever. And that's kind of what you're doing in the luteal phase, where it's kind of this period. For me, it's like the time of the month where you're figuring out what no longer serves you, like what can I get rid of now,
Mhm.
what no, because I think the way I explain to my clients, one of my mentors called it your BS meter. Everybody has a BS meter. And when you're in this particular part of your phase, this is when your BS meter is at its peak, because your hormones are falling, and right, you're more sensitive emotionally, you're more sensitive just to situations and social situations. So therefore, your BS meter is going to be at its peak. So this is the perfect time of your cycle to let go of what no longer serves you, right? This is the time to figure out, okay, are there things that I really should be delegating? Are there things that I'm doing really, and I really don't want to do things anymore? And I was
Mhm.
just doing it because I thought I need to be doing, right? This is like, I feel like this is the perfect time to take inventory, what we can let go of, what we can delegate, what's no longer serving me anymore. And then also giving yourself grace and patience, because you are more sensitive emotionally and all of
Mhm.
those things because of where your hormones are. So when we understand just those basic things, and there's, plenty of ways to go deeper within each of those, but we understand just the basics of your cycle. Like I said, you can really use each phase of your cycle as your superpower, knowing when to be productive, when to be creating, when to step back and kind of assess and, go inward, when to let go of things. So we can kind of use that each and every month to really optimize our output, optimize productivity without burning out.
Yeah, no, I love it because it's good to know, right? When you have more energy, when you have less kind of energy. And do you find that every woman has that same high energy, low energy dependent on their cycle, or can it also be sometimes different?
I mean, it's pretty much the same. I mean, while some women's cycles might be, 24 days or 32 days or, 26
Mm.
days, it's usually the sweet spot is usually around like 26 to 32. 28 is ideal, but
Mm.
some women have a little less, some have a little more. But your hormones are doing the same thing throughout. So
Mhm.
while
Mhm.
yes, your, follicular phase might be a little bit longer or your luteal phase might be a little bit longer, your hormones are doing the same thing in each phase regardless.
Mm. Yeah, I find that very interesting. So for entrepreneurs, right? Like what are some things that you would recommend to do during each phase, or some things to really see like, hey, avoid this during that
Mhm.
particular phase?
Mhm. So with your menstruation phase, when you're actually on your period. So, like I said, this is like the winter. This is the time where you kind of go inward. I would be careful of social commitments you make during this time, right? This isn't the time where you feel exceptionally social or you feel exceptionally energized, right? This is the time to really, again, kind of go in and even kind of like make plans for the rest of your cycle. So this is a good time to kind of evaluate what's happening in your business. Maybe you make your to-do list. I'm really good at to-do lists during this phase of my cycle. So make your to-do list, make your kind of like overview of your vision, like kind of assess where am I going with my vision,
Mm.
and then take that time to go inward because like I said, you have that heightened connection to your intuition during this phase, and things might come through during this part of your cycle that may not otherwise because you didn't take the space for it. So it could be
Mm.
maybe a different direction in your vision, or maybe it's this aha moment you have with the vision for your business, right? So taking
Mm.
the time to slow down, taking the time to make space for that time to go inward can be really supportive during this time. When you're moving into spring is after winter, moving into the later follicular phase. So it's when your hormones are starting to go back up. This is when you're like, it's like the doing phase, like starting a new project, getting things done. You're working on the plans that you laid out in your winter phase, right? You made these lists, you've kind of assessed, okay, what do I need to do this month, kind of thing. And now you're going for it. So you're booking the calls, you're scheduling the calls, you're doing your appointments, you're doing your networking events, you're doing your, coffee dates or whatever, and being open to new things. But however, I would say the thing to be careful with in this season, because you're feeling so energized and productive and social, be careful of the plans you make later in the month because you're going to feel real good about it during this phase. And
Yeah.
if you're making events for later on, that's going to end up being in a different part of your phase, in a different part of the month. Just be mindful of that and maybe give
Mm.
yourself some space to decline, or just, the answer is like, oh, let you know kind of things. Just be careful of commitments you make during this phase, that you're not overcommitting yourself.
Mm.
And then when we move on, and then summer is next, and spring and summer kind of go in together. Summer, because really ovulation is just one day of the month. So it's not saying like you only have one day to be productive, because it does last, it goes with that other part of your cycle. But ovulation in summer, this is kind of that peak of your hormones. And so this is kind of
Mm.
still the spring and summer kind of really all go together. And then from there, going into the fall, this is when this is kind of like the time for like completion of things, right? So again, like I said, like thinking about actual fall, like the season fall, what's happening there, um being mindful of your emotions and kind of giving yourself space, right? This is a
Mm.
time, really, I feel like this is a great time to finish projects and kind of prioritize admin tasks during this time. This is a good time to kind of like check things off your list. You may not be feeling as creative during this process,
Mm.
during this
Mm.
part of your cycle. And so creative things, I really like to hold off on doing those during the spring and the summer, but it's a good thing to do things that just need to be checked off your to-do list, right? Not necessarily requiring like that creative.
Yeah, it would be like, I mean, what comes to my mind is like bookkeeping, those kind of
Exactly.
things that I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to have too much brain power for, but
Exactly.
I have
Yep.
to do it.
Yep. You
Okay,
have to do it.
okay.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm. Yeah, because it's interesting because I have honestly been more unconscious of it. I mean, I'm tracking my period and I know when I have my period, but I have noticed sometimes that I had a busy day when I had my period, and definitely can say that feels like, oh, I wish I
Yes.
wouldn't have done it. So
Yep. Yep.
I love
For
this
sure.
conversation because it also inspires me a little bit like, hey, maybe I'm just gonna try to block my calendar for those days because my period
Totally.
is very predictable. So I think
Yeah.
that's very
Yeah. I mean, that's what I
it's
do.
helpful.
I don't take calls on those, at least for the first few days. I don't schedule calls. I mean, I'm not like I'm sitting around not doing anything, but I just don't, I try to like really be mindful of like how I'm expending my energy on those first few days. Cause
Mhm.
mine is short. I'm lucky because mine is short. So it's not like I have to plan for very long, which I mean, when you start tracking your cycle and when you start really leaning into this part, these cycle syncing pieces, like you said, it is going to be more predictable. And you're really and truly, I do see so many women whose periods become like they weren't so regular before, but they started to get more regular because we're adjusting our energy expenditure. And so our body starts to regulate itself. And so it becomes more predictable and cyclical.
I was gonna ask because I was actually wondering if we have pushed against our nature for all these
Mm-hmm.
years,
Mm-hmm.
we may not feel naturally the low and the high just as
Right.
it's supposed to be, right?
Totally, absolutely. And that, I mean, that's a huge, and that's why I said at the beginning, I think the first step really is just understanding your cycle. Because like you said, if it's been this thing, and I did the same thing for years, trust me, so I'm there. If it's a thing that it's like such a drag, it's like, oh my gosh, it's coming, I hate it. And you're just pushing through every time and just forcing yourself to do things every time. Then, like you said, we've kind of shut off these innate parts of us, right? And we become
Mhm.
so disconnected from it that we're disconnected from our body and understanding and feeling into how our energy changes, because once you tune
Mhm.
into it, you can't unlearn it. It's like now you're like, oh well, now I it's like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can't
yeah.
unsee it. Like it's there, and you
Mhm.
just feel it. So it's just when you become more connected with your body, you do start to feel those. And it may
Mhm.
be something you've never felt before and you've never thought about.
Mhm.
Well, my energy does feel different during this time. And so it's a learning for a lot of people, and just connecting with your body again.
Mhm. So like taking as an example, if let's say I'm in the spring, I got my period, right? Starts, but I push through. I
Hmm.
have all these meetings, I'm working and working. Then I can imagine that when spring and summer comes, I'm not feeling as energetic as I could be
Exactly.
because I overdrained my body and then I cannot fully experience that.
For sure. 100%.
Mm.
100%. Well, and then, you think about the physical ramifications of that too. I mean, when you're pushing and forcing, that what's going to take the biggest hit is your adrenals, and your adrenals are
Mm.
responsible for your making your progesterone. And so when you're wearing your adrenals out, now it's going to affect your progesterone production, which is going to affect your hormones throughout the whole rest of the month. I mean, it's just like this chain reaction. And so there's so
Mm.
many physical things that happen when we force and push rather than listen and honor what our body's telling us.
Mm. Ah, that is very insightful. I love it.
Hmm.
Very powerful. So I was wondering, since we're both into human design, let's pull up some charts,
Yeah.
like yours, mine. We can look at it a
Yeah.
little bit because I think it's also for the listeners going to be the most juicy to actually like, okay, if you look at a chart, like what are the things you
Hmm.
look at?
Hmm.
And we can swap around both of ours
Yeah.
and I'll just see where that takes us.
I love it.
Like Manny Standryle all over the place.
I love it.
So I think I have us here. So this is you. So I'm
Perfect.
actually gonna give you my chart first. So
Okay.
I'm sure
Cool.
you know yours, and then I geek out on yours. So um, let's say I'm a client of yours, and I
Yes.
just wanna have some. Okay, how can I, you know, live my most vital lifestyle? What is important
Yes.
for me to look
So
out?
this is so good. So we have two things in common because we both have the open root and solar plexus. And these are actually two of my favorite centers to talk about for women for two reasons. So I mentioned the adrenals a second ago, and we know that the root center is a pressure center, right? And so this was a big realization for me, and especially kind of like for me was like harnessing or like taming the management energy and not pushing and forcing too much because of the open root center. But
Mm-hmm.
for women, just in general, we are conditioned to just like we've been saying, like just push through, right? Just do it. Just put your big
Mm-hmm.
eyes on and push through, right? That's just kind of how we're conditioned to do things. And the root center is connected to our adrenals. And so when we're pushing and forcing and we're not designed to do that, our adrenals are going to take a hit. And when I tell you, when I was going through my FDN training and I have to do all the labs on myself, I was completely shocked when I saw my lab. My adrenals were like in the toilet. Like, how am I
In the
alive?
toilet.
In the toilet. Like they
Wow.
it was not a good situation. And I knew I was like on the verge of burnout. I didn't know I was in like full-fledged burnout. But for me, this was a big
Mm-hmm.
piece, and is this open root center and pushing myself far beyond what my root center wanted me to do. And so I find this
So
open root
gonna
center.
show your
Mhm,
chart. Yeah.
yeah, the open root center is a big one. And it's listening to your body and understanding when those kind of like productive waves come, and then harnessing those productive waves, and then pulling back on the gas pedal when they go away, right? And knowing when to step
Mhm.
back. So the root center is a big one that I hone in on a lot for women. And then the other one is your open, and yours is completely open. Look at you. The solar plexus. So I also mine is undefined. So the solar plexus we know is the emotional center. And this is what I find. So I just love this stuff so much. And I find putting all the science is fascinating. So your solar plexus is your emotional center, and it is connected to your detox organs. So when you
Mm.
think about how we process emotions, and science is showing us that emotions are stored as chemicals in the body, right? Our
Mm.
body is just one big pharmacy. So our science is showing us that emotions are stored as chemicals in the body, right? If you think about this, and we're putting the science and the woo together here. When we are not we're especially with the open center here, undefined center, open or undefined center. When we are holding on to emotions, stuffing them down, shoving them down, not allowing ourselves to feel all the things, you are literally storing that as toxins in your body, and you're affecting your detox organs. Your detox organs literally can't function optimally. So this is another big one that I hone in on with my clients, because especially with the undefined center, because this is a big, there's so many connections to our detox organs, because when our detox organs aren't functioning properly, it's going to affect your hormones, right? Our hormones aren't going to be properly filtered out. It's going to affect your brain. It's that gut brain connection, because you're recycling a bunch of junk toxicity throughout your body. It's going to affect your gut. It's going to affect your gut brain connection. So it's going to affect your mood and your sleep. Like, it's just another chain reaction, right? So that's another big one there to hone in on, and just kind of, I have to have conversations and walking through things with my clients, helping them understand what does it mean to process emotions, right? What does it mean to let yourself feel all the things? Like, that's another thing we're not really taught. We don't really get the manual on how to process our emotions. So that's something that is a big one really for a lot of my
Yeah.
clients.
Yeah, I love it, because actually, I mean, I just had a call in my group from the podcasting course today, and that's what we all talked about, feeling your emotions. And
Mm-hmm.
even before I got into human design, I worked solely with, it was called emotional acceptance, and just
Mm-hmm.
feeling and processing your emotions. And in the beginning, for me, it was actually overwhelming, because there was so much.
So much coming up.
And
Mm-hmm.
because when we have been conditioned for years not to feel anything, there's so much bottled up, and then all of a sudden it's
Totally.
like so much wants to be purged. And
Yes.
I mean, at some point it balances out. And then obviously, like you say, and then through human design, we also understand this. And what I find important to say is that, and I think you said it, because especially the undefined centers, but it's also, right, when we have the defined centers as well. And because recently, I don't know if you have seen this, but I'm also now in the true sidereal human design a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And there I have a defined root center. So it's very interesting to me, because I have people always tell me how grounding I am. And so it does also make a lot of sense. But still, you can also push through with a defined root center,
Mm-hmm. For
It's
sure. Yeah,
it's
totally.
just that the undefined is more,
Yeah.
I guess, more vulnerable to that. So
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I think that's what it is, because yeah, I mean, we know whether you have an undefined or defined solar plexus, we all need to feel the things. We all
yeah.
need to feel all the things. So it's
Mm,
just, yeah, it's just understanding that there's just kind of a different level of sensitivity with those things being undefined. And
mm,
it's just kind of, and I know you probably say this to a lot of your clients who you work with, like trying not to see it as like a pro or a con, or like a good thing or a bad thing, but it just
mm-hmm.
is. And we just have to learn
Exactly.
how to work with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of the dilemma I'm trying to resolve, because so many people think, oh, because I have this, I'm screwed, or this is a
Exactly.
disadvantage. I was like, no, your chart is perfect as you are,
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
more like the chart tells a story, and
Right.
just the general wisdom of the centers, if it's defined or not.
Exactly.
It's just through the defined and undefined, we learn about the energy, to me,
Mm-hmm.
because the defined reflects back the undefined, and so
Yep.
no,
Yeah.
the undefined reflects back the
Yeah.
defined,
Yeah. Yeah.
this way
Yeah.
around. And
Mhm.
it's just the general wisdom that all of these energies bring to us, and the
100%.
centers and the gates and the channels and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I love that. Anything else that stands out in my chart where you would be like
Let's
asking me
see.
questions about?
Yeah. So I have an open head center as well. And I was trying to, I thought of a client, I can't remember though, but I think it was I can't remember if it was the open head, but the open head, at least for me, I know I've had to work with this too, is like, actually, no, it was a client I worked with. It was last week. It was her open head and G center that we were working with, but it was the rumination. Like for her, that was what came up for her a lot in one of the sessions we did together. It was this constant rumination and ruminating things, and just keeping the reel playing over and over in her head. It was just leading, she was dealing with a lot of like mental anxiety. And I think a lot
Mm-hmm.
of women can resonate with that, whether you have an open crown or not. Again, no one is immune to that. But
Mm-hmm.
I think a big one for the open crown, I think open crown and open ajna, both dealing with kind of that mental anxiety that can happen from those. And again, like we're saying, just kind of learning how to kind of tame it, and how to like where to put that energy, and how to work with that energy when it ends up kind of going up into the head. And for a lot of women, really, I think not I think it is. It's all about getting back into the body.
Mm.
And I think that's something that for so many women is such a hard thing to do. And not even women too. I think just in the Western world, like we're such an analytical mental society. It's all about thinking and analyzing and all of that. We've kind of lost that somatic piece of it. And so I think for the open head and the open ajna, it's giving women a lot of somatic practices to help them get back into their body to stay out of the head. So we can start making decisions and feeling things in our body versus just letting it just go up into the head and run around.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I mean, that's the whole message, right, of human design. The head is not here to make decisions,
Exactly.
drop into the body, because that's
Exactly.
really where everything happens. And I love this wisdom that the head and the mind is here to be curious, to analyze, like you're analyzing your labs. You need your mind for that, right? And to look
Yeah.
at it, or even right now to look at the chart. Like we need
Yeah.
our mind for those kind
Yes.
of things,
Right.
and to ask powerful questions. But it's
Mm-hmm.
not here to figure things out and to
Mm-hmm.
make decisions. So
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That was it's a big thing for my client I was working with last week. It was she felt like she had to be the fixer and fix everything. And I'm like, or
mhm.
you could just let things be. Just let things be how they are,
Yeah.
you know? So it's definitely it takes some practice.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. So now, since we're both mani-gens, right, I think it's going to be
Mhm.
fun also to show people like this is how my chart looks like. And now
Uh-huh.
yours, it looks so different, right?
Yes,
But we're
yes.
still, so you're 3-5 mani-gen,
Mhm.
and you have that sleeping phoenix incarnation cross, which I
Mhm.
love.
Mhm.
So what do you love the most about your chart?
I have been, so here's what I've been loving the most lately, and I've been diving more deeper into these parts. I love how much, so this is like something I kind of came into last year because I
Mhm.
feel like as I've, kind of gone on my spiritual journey and kind of learn more about myself and all that, I feel like I am more intuitive than I ever realized. And I feel like I have these intuitive gifts that are kind of like under the surface that like are starting to come out. And so
Mhm.
I've been tuning into my splenic center a lot and seeing like I have a lot of definition there, like I have a lot of stuff going on. And so for me right now, that's what is intriguing me the most. And like learning more about those pieces and the gates and the channels that are coming off that, all of that, and kind of trying to like kind of bring those pieces out in myself.
Mm. That's really interesting because are you into the gene keys as well?
I am. Just started getting into that. I started doing a
Okay.
course last year.
Yeah, because I don't know if you know this yet, but we have something called the core wound in the gene keys, and that's your unconscious Mars.
Hmm.
And so the core wound eventually turns into your vocation, which is really like what you're here to teach and share and
Hmm.
put out into the world. And you have gate 57. Gate 57
Hmm.
is the most intuitive energy we have in the
Intuition. Yep.
chart.
Yep.
So that's really big. And I think, I mean, everything that you have shared with me so far about the cycle syncing, that has all to do with being in tune,
Hmm.
intuition, really
Totally.
with your body. And so in a way, I feel like that you're really already living out your vocation in some way. And I
Hmm.
think even for me, so mine is the 40, and which is all about slowing down, the podcast. And
Hmm.
I didn't create my podcast because I knew about the 40. That was a realization I had in hindsight. And I want to also mention this for the listeners that trust yourself. Just like Hope is saying right now, there's this thing with intuition coming up. It probably is just coming up for you, right? Not because you're like, I need to do this because I have this gate or
Right.
something like
Right.
this.
Exactly.
And you have already been doing this. And the more you just trust yourself and do the thing that, yeah, brings you joy. Like for me, it was like it's my entire life always this message: slow down, slow down. And
Hmm.
eventually was like, ah, that's the name of my podcast, The Art of Slowing Down. And I even had a couple of times like the urge, like, I should change the name of my podcast. But then I always come back to, no, it's just perfect the way it
Yeah,
is.
it is perfect. Yeah, totally. Well, that's what resonated with me when I found it because I had been
Yeah.
telling myself that you need to slow down. So I think
Mhm.
it's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Because sometimes I'm like, well, it's enough slowing down now, but I find always again the message keeps just coming back, and I
Hmm.
find for myself that the more I slow down, the more magic happens. And that is also now connected to your 57, the intuition piece. Like without slowing down, like you mentioned, right? Let's go back to the cycle syncing.
Mhm.
You're not going to be really in tune with your intuition. You're going to be busy
Right.
and doing other things.
Exactly.
And your intuition
Mhm.
is like, hi, I want to
Mhm.
say something, but you are like, in a way, well, I don't have time for that,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know? And that
Mhm.
intuitive insight could literally change the trajectory of your business,
100%. Yep.
right?
100%.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
and you also mentioned effortlessness and ease. And I have seen sometimes people online, they get a little bit annoyed or pissed. Well, nothing is effortless.
Yes.
But then
Yes.
hold on. What does effortlessness actually mean? Effortlessness. It does not mean to put in no effort at
Right.
all.
Exactly.
It's just, and it's actually written also, I think it's in the 40th gene key, or one of the gene keys where Richard Rudd explains it beautifully. It simply means not to put unnecessary effort into it. That's not
Mhm.
necessary. Like where you
Right.
overexert
Exactly.
yourself, and then that's with a 40, we get into exhaustion, right? We push too
Mhm.
much against the natural flow. But when we allow ourselves to do the thing, right? Like Hope, you love the cycle singing and the functional nutrition. That's your thing. That's your vibe. That's your zone of genius. And is that hard work for you?
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, it's
It's
fun, right?
fun.
It's the
It's fun.
day. It's
Exactly.
like I could do it all day.
Exactly.
And that's exactly how I also feel always, where, yeah, I'm working hard and I had all these calls and I did it, but it doesn't really feel like work
Feel
because
like work, right?
it's effortlessly flowing
Mhm.
out or through
Right.
me because I'm allowing this, and that's the city of the 40, the divine will. I'm just letting it
Mhm.
flow through me.
Mhm.
It's like you are a faucet and you're connected to the pipe, but you're trying to get water from a different pipe that's not supposed to
Right.
be for you. That's when we are putting too much effort into things instead of just letting flow the pipe that you're connected to,
A
which
hundred
is your
percent.
higher self, God, source,
Yeah.
universe, divine guidance, I think, however
Yeah.
you want to call it. So,
Yeah. I agree so
um,
much.
yeah, that's why I find so much wisdom always in that core wound or that
Mhm.
vocation, the unconscious Mars, because that is actually something from the teaching in human design I would never had looked at the
Right.
unconscious Mars. I
Right.
mean, there was no like specificity. I always
Mhm.
have a hard time saying that word, or importance to look at that energy, and that's really something that the gene keys have brought to me, and I just find
Yes.
this so incredibly powerful. And then also, because actually that's the two things we talked about in our course today, like the radiance gene key, which is your unconscious
Mm.
sun, so
Mhm.
yours is the 34, right? So
Mhm.
for you to be physically well, and I think that's actually, I wonder actually, because you're doing nutrition, like the radiance gene key is what's really important for your physical, emotional, mental
Mhm.
well-being. So
Right.
that is one, I think, super important. And you have the 34, which is like the busiest energy we can have. I mean, that's the manager archetype,
Right.
so to say.
Right.
And even people
Mhm.
that are not managers, I have found, I mean, you can be a projector, but you have gate 34 defined, you're going to identify a lot of the things of the manager because
Mhm.
it's multi-passionate, and
Mhm.
you have so much power. You need to respond to things, you need to do and keep yourself engaged in life and be physically active. So
Mhm.
is that something you also experience for yourself?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I own a Pilates and fitness studio. So I mean, it's been like the staying active and the doing and the busy, like I mean, 100%. I mean, that's been, yeah, that resonates a lot.
Yeah. And it's when we respond to things that light us up, right? Not when
Hmm.
it's like, I have to do it now, but I'm really not feeling it.
Hmm. For sure.
And obviously, I think that's kind of important to talk about. So, sometimes we have things we don't feel like it, but it's more
Hmm.
from a place of fear,
Yes.
where like, fear of the future, or fear that it's going to be too much of a struggle, I'm going to fail
Hmm.
or something. And then we're like, or we feel like we're not good enough and who's going to listen to us, or those kind of things. Now,
Hmm.
those things, I have found that it's actually important to do push through in some way, because it's just that
Hmm.
fear
Hmm.
holding you back, but your body
Right.
initially was
Right.
like, go do that thing. Because I think
Mhm.
oftentimes people really misunderstand this, like, oh, do what lights you up, and We talked about this about another recent podcast episode, because not everything is like, eating chocolate or candy.
Rainbows and sunshine. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. But then we experience such an immense growth when we, we respond to something, but then the fear kicks in. But when we
Right.
have then the courage to actually do the thing that we initially felt like
Mm-hmm.
the impulse for, that is
Mm-hmm.
really, really, really important.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you also, I mean, you have gate 53 as well, which is also very initiating.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, well, that's your moon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what drives you. So you have a lot of go do things, start things. I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you're a bundle of energy for sure.
That's, yeah, that's the gal I worked with, the first human design coach I had. It's basically, she's like, you've got a lot of energy going on. Yeah, I
Mm,
feel that. It's been so fascinating to learn just how to use that. So I
yeah.
love learning.
Mm. And I love, so you also have a podcast, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's called Hopeful and Wholesome, and it is all health, wellness, spirituality, inspiration. It's just kind of a little bit of everything. Just, I mean, again, it's like typical Manny Jen style. We talk about a lot of different stuff because it's just all the
Yeah.
stuff that I like talking about. And so, I have guest experts on to talk about, like I interviewed a guy today talking about toxicity and, toxins in
Mm,
our food and water and all that. But I also like to talk about human design and woo-woo stuff. I've had mediums and all kinds of, so it's all the things I love, and I just put it all together in my show.
mm. Yeah, I love it. I'm familiar with that. Just playing with all the things that light us up. That's
Yes,
that's
exactly.
wonderful. No, because also if I had a reading with you, right? Because you have single definitions, like everything in your chart flows to your throat, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have so much energy. I mean, basically every center flows. I mean, the only one, the will center, gets filtered, so to say, through the spleen, but still, it's
Mm-hmm.
that willpower indirectly also connected to your throat. And it's so important for you to speak. You have a lot to say, especially
Mm-hmm.
with the defined
Yeah.
ajna to the throat. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta talk, even
Yes.
to tune into your sacral authority, I have found. And I would love to hear how it is for you. But yeah, we say just follow your gut, follow your sacral response. But you have so much going on in your head all the time
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
it's probably necessary for you to talk things out,
Talk it out.
also
Yes.
to,
Mm-hmm.
which is what we learn from the mental projector usually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, right, exactly. No, but that does resonate with me. And I found, when I first started my Pilates studio, I was like all trying to be high and mighty, like, oh, I'm going to do this myself, but I don't need help and I can do
Mm,
it all myself, like a lot of us do when we start businesses. And I mean, that was really the first way I ran myself into the ground, my adrenals into the ground. But it was at that I found later after hiring a manager, and she's like a gift from the gods. Having someone to talk things out with, just that
mm,
alone. And we complement each other so well. And I
mm,
realized that for so long, like the mental anxiety I was feeling for so long when I'm like, oh, I'll do this myself and I don't need help. It was not having that voice to like talk things out, even whether she's helping me make decisions or not. It's just, like you said, just being able to talk it out.
mm,
And yeah, it really does make a difference. And having my husband
mm.
now too. And when I first started, we weren't married. And so now that he also helps that part too, and just listening, and he's very good at like listening and not trying to fix things, but it's like I just need
That's
to talk it
awesome.
out, and then so it does help a
Mm,
lot.
mm. Yeah, I love that, because I find that that's where sometimes the traditional human design teachings are a little bit boxed in, right? Because
Yes,
people think,
totally.
oh, only projectors, or especially mental projectors,
Hmm.
need to talk things out. But
Right.
I have found almost everybody, especially when there's a defined asana to a throat or
Yes.
had an asana defined, it's
Hmm.
very, very important, because just as we get this all out of our head, we're like, oh, I already have my answer. I don't
Yeah.
need any like figuring it out anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's almost like we're making space for the clarity to come
Hmm.
through, because it's just
Yep.
too busy, and then we
Yes.
let it out, and then there's this one piece of wisdom like,
Yes.
okay.
That's exactly it. And because honestly, most of the time, that's how I feel like I told my husband that one time, I'm like, if you could like go inside of my head and see what is going on, like it is like a circus show going on in my head. So it really is just kind of like, I just need to kind of sort through. And then it's like, okay, there's the answer there. I just needed to clear all the other stuff out.
Mm, mm. And I think it's also a beautiful practice to just talk and have somebody listen, not
Yes.
to, you know, and even because I think so many times if we don't communicate it,
Hmm.
like the other person probably feels in a way obligated to give advice or
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
fix
To
it. I
help.
think
Hmm.
we actually have to say, hey, I just need to talk. I
Yep.
just want you to listen to me. Like, I'm not looking
Yep.
for you to tell me anything.
Exactly.
And then if we do need something, we can always ask for it, right? I think that's,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, like human design has been the best communication skill educator in
Hmm.
the world, just from understanding how all these dynamics really, really
100%.
work. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree. That's such a
Mm,
big tool. Well, and I think it's important too, like we were talking earlier about the undefined solar plexus. And I find when I'm working with my clients with the undefined solar plexus, and actually now that I think about it, both of them, the past two that I've worked with, they had undefined crown and ajna. But for them, I feel like it was I was able to hold space for them to, because I think that's sometimes what I'm trying to say. I think that's sometimes all you need is just someone to hold space for you to get things out
mm,
and to not for you to try to like, we don't have to analyze it all. We don't have to make sense of it. It doesn't even have to make sense, but just to have someone to hold space for you to talk and get things out. And because like with my client, I had a session with her the other day, and we were talking things out when we did kind of this hypnosis session, but then she's talking things out, and in all I needed, I asked questions, and that was it. I didn't give her answers, didn't give her options, but she ended up getting to the answer. She just needed prompts. She just needed somebody to prompt
mm,
her just to get to the root of like what was actually going on in her body and what was being stored there. And so
mm,
yeah, I think it's just having someone to hold space and not, like you said, not have to try to fix it or
mm.
analyze it or make sense of it. It doesn't have to make sense. It is what it
Yeah.
is.
No, honestly, the best coaching skill we can have is listening
For
and
sure.
actually empowering the person to find their wisdom within themselves. And this is also what the Gene Keys are all about. You know, I did the whole Gene Keys guides training, and even when I have a reading, I mean, yeah, I give you my insights and when you ask and all these things, but the biggest transformation comes through, yeah, just giving a space and listening to
Mm-hmm.
people,
Exactly.
you know,
Yep.
because I cannot contemplate a jinky for you. I just can't.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
You can't do it for somebody.
if I read the 34, it's gonna mean totally something else than
Mm-hmm.
it does for you. So
Right.
it's a very, very unique um experience. And I think, I mean, oh my God, Richard Wright has so many beautiful quotes. It's like
Yes.
I think the most healing thing you can do is just yeah, be present with a person and just listen, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just the presence of love. And I think this whole also giving advice and fixing and telling people what to do is just actually very, very disempowering
Yeah.
for most people because it creates this like codependency. Like I
Exactly.
need this person. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm always
Mm-hmm.
the happiest. Like, I mean, look, I love as a coach to work with people long term, but if you're good after 3 months and you fly on your own,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Exactly.
Right?
Totally. Yes. That's always
Yeah.
my goal. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody but that not too long ago because she made a comment to me where she was like, I like how like when our time was up, like there
Mm.
wasn't a push to like, oh, we need to keep going. Because I was like, well, if you're done and you're ready, then you're done and you're ready. Like there's I
Yeah.
don't if you still need me, at
Mm.
least after the length of time we worked together, like I feel like I haven't really done my job very well.
Yeah.
Like that the whole goal is for you to go, like you said, just go fly. Go, you can go do it on
Mm.
your own now.
Mm. Exactly. Yeah, we are very much on the same page. I love it. So thank you for the beautiful work that you do. You definitely also gave me a little bit of inspiration today
I'm so glad.
to, because this time was interesting, like not because I planned it, it just worked out. I just had it was my birthday week. My mom was here for a whole week, and I
Mm-hmm.
had literally that week, um, I took off. I blocked my calendar. I barely worked. I mean, I did a couple of things here and there, but I had zero client calls.
Mm-hmm.
And my partner was also here, and that was literally the day my period started.
It
So
worked out
I
well.
actually, this time, I feel like, and right now I'm fully in the spring
Yeah.
phase. And I mean,
Yeah.
today, this is my fourth call today, and I'm still
Yeah.
surprised, like, okay,
That's
I'm doing
amazing.
this.
Yeah. You're
Because
riding it.
yeah, so I'm actually unintentionally, just because it happened. And funnily enough, now we have this session. I always love the synchronicities. It's always
Yeah,
so amazing to
totally.
me. Yeah, yeah. But I think I really want to pay attention to it now and actually maybe for the next few months block my calendar, because
Yeah.
I can push through. But then I have noticed for myself that sometimes I'm actually not as energized
Mhm.
during the ovulation phase. But
Exactly.
now I'm kind of like, well, it makes kind of sense because I just
Hmm.
push through, because
For
my period
sure.
is also not that long. I don't have
Hmm.
like, it doesn't bother me much, but
Yeah.
it's there. And I sometimes
Right.
kind of, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna,
Yeah. Just
you
gonna go.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. For
instead
sure.
of giving my body this really deeper
Yeah.
rest and
Yeah.
recharge that it probably is
Yeah.
craving.
Totally. Well, and I think it's important. I'm glad you said that because I find I've had that conversation with women before where they're like, "Well, I really don't feel anything that much. Like,
Mm,
maybe have a little crampy, but it's nothing crazy where it like I have to be on the couch with the heating pad."
yeah.
But my response is always, it doesn't matter. Like your body is literally going through a controlled inflammatory response. Like you're bleeding, just like if you were to fall and cut your
Mm,
elbow. Like your body is going under this controlled inflammatory response, and it does require you to, and your hormones are at a certain place. So it's like whether you feel like you quote should or need to, the same thing is happening to your body. And so it's still putting, when you're pushing through, it's still putting the same pressure on the same organs and body parts. But rather, if you were just to kind of slow down and let your body rest and,
mm.
take care of it and nurture it during that time.
No, no, I love it. And the other takeaway I had was also, because I have sometimes moments I've noticed, like bookkeeping and stuff. I can do
Mhm.
it, but there are times where my body is just like, I don't want to do it, and it feels
Yes.
so hard. And then I
Yes.
push through it. But I think I'm gonna give it a try now to do that during the
Yeah,
fall
it's the
phase,
fall.
right?
It's
Before
that's
I get
right.
the period.
Hmm.
So I think these are two things I'm really gonna look at
Yes.
my calendar once we
I
get
love
off and
that.
just,
Yes, plan it
yeah.
out. I love
Yeah,
it.
and for the listeners as well. I mean, look at your, period cycle. If not,
Mhm.
I have an app. I think I use
Yeah, there's lots of good apps out there. Yeah.
Clue. I love that app. It's
Hmm.
actually for free, and
Hmm.
because you always see, like, when those things happen, and it's pretty
Yeah,
predictable. So
that's perfect.
awesome.
Yeah.
Now, before we get off, Hope, how can people reach out to you, work with you? Tell me all about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. You can find me on Instagram. I'm at the Hope Pedraza. You can shoot me a message there. You can go to my website. It's hopefulandwholesome.com. And then, of course, I mentioned my podcast. You can find me on my podcast, Hopeful and Wholesome. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I'm gonna make sure to put everything in the show notes. Again, thank you for reaching out and
Yes.
sharing your wisdom with everyone. It was such a joy.
Thank you so much for
And
having me.
before I let you go, I have one more question for you. I always ask you probably know this since you're listening to this podcast. So, what's one nugget of wisdom you want to leave the listeners with that was kind of life-changing for yourself?
I think what is coming up for me is, which we've kind of mentioned it before, but it never hurts to mention it again, but it is tuning into your intuition. I find that for so long, kind of, I don't want to say I shut it off, but I just kind of shoved it aside. And I spent a long time in my brick and mortar business doing what everybody else told me I needed to be doing rather than what felt good for me. And, we talk about shooting ourselves in human design, and that, I mean, is essentially what I was doing. But I think for me, the most empowering thing for me has been listening to myself and really tuning into that inner voice and connecting with that inner voice inside. And I think for women too, in general, I speak to this so often because the women who come to me typically have chronic symptoms going on, and the medical gaslighting thing is a real thing, especially with women. We're told it's in our head, or it's just your hormones, or just take an Advil or whatever, and it's really perpetuating this cycle of us really becoming disconnected with our bodies and with our intuition.
Mm,
So all that to say, the biggest nugget I can leave the listeners with is just really taking the time to tune into your intuition and making that a part of your I mean, really making that a part of your daily practice, the more you can speak the language of your body, which to me is your intuition, the more connected you are with your soul. And I think everything just becomes easier from there.
What I have learned from you, especially powerful right when your cycle starts.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wonderful. So
Mhm.
here we go. We all learned a lot of beautiful things, lots of wisdom. So thank you again, Hope. It was
Yes,
such a
thank
pleasure to have
you.
you. You listeners, as always, thanks for tuning in, and I'm excited to be with you all on the next episode.